Hello, everyone. This is Jerome Blackman with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the Natural Gas Star Program. I'd like to welcome you to our program update webinar, and glad you could join us. We've got a lot of information we want to share with you within the next hour, and really excited you could join us for this first webinar of 2019. All right, and with that, I'd like to get started with our webinar. We're going to cover a couple of things today. First, we're going to give you a summary of the accomplishments by our Natural Gas Star partners for the reporting year 2017. This is the latest information we got from our partners, which were submitted last year. We're also going to tell you about some new things happening for the Natural Gas Star program this year, highlight a few things that are new and proposed. The other thing is we're going to give you an update and a preview of some forms that are being revised and updated, and we'll allow you to look at those and get your first impressions of those. And then we also want to highlight a couple of upcoming events and webinars. So, partner accomplishments. For the calendar year of 2018, we had over 50 partners submit to us annual reports detailing their voluntary efforts to reduce methane emissions from their operations. The activities reported to us consisted of over 45 technologies and practices over all segments: production, gathering, processing, transmission, and distribution. And those actions resulted in 96.8 BCF of reported methane emission reductions. So that was quite an accomplishment. And if you another way to look at that is if you say that the value of gas is about $3 per MCF, that's about $290 million as far as gas savings from those efforts for that particular year. The next couple of charts are going to highlight these reductions, and we'll show you how it looked on the annual basis for 2017. So you'll see that there was a slight, significant uptick in reductions reported to us in 2017 compared to the previous last few years. So that's nice to see. And this chart shows the cumulative reductions that have been reported to the program since its inception. So it's over 1.4 or 5 TCF as far as reductions reported to the program over its lifetime. So that's, great accomplishments of our partners. And these are not, things that EPA has done. It's really the companies that are involved in our partnership that are really achieving these quite significant reductions. If you look at the reductions reported to us by segment, the vast majority of the reductions, probably not surprisingly, came from the production sector, almost 90% from production alone. Transmission accounted for 9% of the reductions reported to us, and distribution and gathering process both reported respectively 1% reductions for 2017. One of the things which we, EPA, do with the information that is submitted to us is provide partner-specific summary reports, which show and highlight what companies have done in the program. So for those of you who do report to us, we do appreciate it because it really highlights the collective accomplishments of the partners in our program, but we also try to highlight for you the different activities that you've implemented and the significance of those reductions, and hopefully you find these of value. I know some partners use these reports to augment and supplement their sustainability reports for their corporations. So I mentioned a little bit about some updates for 2019. So I want to give you a high-level look at what's happening as far as new things to watch in 2019. And by way of background, I'll give you a little bit of inside baseball here, but as a federal government, the EPA is required by the Paperwork Reduction Act to obtain approval from OMB, the Office of Management Budget, before collecting information from our partners. And so this is something that is a routine process that we have to go through. It's done every 3 years, but because we collect information from more than than 9 companies, we're required to renew this request every 3 years. And the importance of this is this information actually helps us to tout the good works that your companies are doing in our program. So while it's somewhat of a burden for us here at EPA, it's a great opportunity for you because it allows us to share the great things you're doing as far as reducing your methane emissions through these voluntary efforts. So once again, I just wanted to mention that the information collection request allows us to do that, and it really just describes what information we ask and are collecting, and then estimates the burden to you, partners, for providing that information to us. So that's something that is just tracked by OMB. It's done every 3 years, as I mentioned, and this year we're in the process of renewing this information collection request. And so, as you may be aware of, there was a first notice that went out about this back in September. A second notice about this went out early March, and just wanted to take this opportunity to mention this to you because this is also an opportunity for us to make some changes to the program, which we think will reduce the burden to our partners and be of benefit and value to you. So what are these proposed updates that we're doing? First one I'll mention is the Memorandum of Understanding. Our MOU has not been changed in over 26 years of the program. And one of the things that we are proposing is to create a partnership agreement, which is a streamlined, more flexible document, which will cover all the various segments. And we won't have separate MOUs for different segments. We'll have one document, but it'll highlight, what are the responsibilities and just, make it easier to see all of that in one place. The other thing that we're doing is we're moving away from the online reporting tool, which we've used for a number of years, and we're going to Excel-based forms for reporting reporting reductions to us. And that's something that should be also a benefit to you because you won't require a password. You can easily submit that and email that information to us. And the last item I'll mention here is that implementation plans, we're going to be very explicit that they're optional, and partners can either use templates, which we provide, or their own to document and show the different approaches they're intending to use as far as reducing methane emissions through their efforts. So that's the major sort of big high-level overview of what we're doing here. I mentioned the partnership agreement. The new partnership agreement will consolidate the 4 currently existing separate MOUs into one single form, and you can just check which segments apply to your operations as appropriate. The other thing it does is it'll more realistically reflect that reporting to us, while it's very important, is not the only way companies can participate and contribute to the program. This partnership agreement will highlight some of the other things that partners can do, such as participating in a technology transfer workshop, helping us develop a case study, hosting events, sharing information with others. There's a number of ways companies can participate and engage with us beyond reporting. And we made this change because we've heard from some companies who said that over the years, given what has changed, a lot of the things that used to be great voluntary activities to report to us are no longer voluntary and no longer there. So we wanted to update our agreement to allow companies to feel comfortable still being engaged with the program. So this is actually a look at the proposed partnership agreement. And at the end, toward the end of this presentation, we will direct you to where you can see all these documents in the ICR regulations.gov website. But just wanted to highlight for you that the form basically is just 2 pages, front and back. It highlights the various segments that you can select for your operations. And then once again, it just shows that in addition to reporting, which is important, there are other ways which companies can interact with us to stay active in the program. So I think that's pretty much what I want to say. I'm also joined here today by my colleague, Sarah Manassian. Many of you know her, and she will talk a little bit about the proposed changes to the reporting forms for our programs. So I'll hand it over to Sarah right now.
Thanks, Jerome, and hi, everyone. As Jerome mentioned before, the program is phasing out the current online reporting tool and moving into an Excel form-based system. I'm going to start with a few points and an overview of why we think this change is important and will be of value to our partners. First of all, specifically with this form, what we're doing as we're moving into Excel is consolidating some of the reporting elements and removing unnecessary data inputs. And essentially, those are fields that we've been collecting data on and not necessarily using, or have noticed that partners may not be submitting data on. So, rather than put those out there and collect those data elements, we are removing a few elements, to reduce the number of data elements that you have to report to us overall. In general, we think that the Excel forms will allow for a simplified data entry for you all. It'll just be a simple tabular format that you'll be able to fill out. You'll have that in front of you too before the reporting season starts. So it'll be a little easier to get ready for the reporting season, we think. And overall, with all of these things, we think that will ultimately reduce your reporting burden to the program. At the bottom here, we have a tentative high-level schedule for this year's reporting season. Again, keeping in mind that there is that open ICR, so we do need to wait for that to get finished up before we kick it off this year. We'll certainly keep in close contact with our partners, as always, to let you know what the timeline will be. But generally, we expect that that initial reporting email and the forms will go out to partners sometime in the spring. Partners will be asked to submit their reports by the summer, and then we'll prepare and distribute the summary reports that Jerome highlighted a few moments ago sometime in the fall. A few more specific updates that we're introducing with these reporting form updates. Recognizing that the program has been around for 25 plus years now, and what initially were considered BMPs or best management practices have been joined with new best management practices that we had previously called PROs, or Partner Reported Opportunities. So many of these have become BMPs in their own right. So moving forward, we plan to call all reported activities BMPs. We also, with that change, are planning to start organizing the reporting forms by emission source, rather than saying BMP1, BMP2, PROs, and so forth. We'll instead refer to the specific emission sources, pneumatic controllers, mains and services, and so on. And with this change, we did also want to point out that we are introducing proposing to introduce just a couple small changes to the methodologies for actually reporting emissions reductions. And this is specifically for 2 emission sources, and the goal here is to improve alignment with other EPA programs, specifically the Greenhouse Gas Reporting Program, which many of our partners already report to. So in the interest of consistency among the EPA programs, us with GHGRP, Subpart W, and even within our own family of programs between Natural Gas Star and Methane Challenge, we are looking to introduce consistency where we can. And the 2 sources I'm about to speak are the first 2 we've identified that we think have good potential for making some updates to use more recent emission factors and improve our alignment with our other EPA programs. The first one you'll see on the screen here is pneumatic controllers. In the current Gas Star BMP, this only includes replacement of high bleed devices. In our proposed updated methodology, we're also going to include replacement of low bleed controllers and calculate reductions using emission factors in the GHGRP. The other update we're proposing is for the distribution mains and services source. In the current Gas Star BMP, this accounts for mains replacement of any type of material, replacement of cast iron, replacement of plastic, and so on. And reductions are calculated as the miles of pipeline replaced multiplied by the pipeline materials emission factor. And that comes from a 1996 GRI study. Our proposed updated methodology would account for replacement of cast iron and unprotected steel mains with specific types of pipeline, and then calculate the reductions as the change in emissions that result from those replacements. And again, we would continue to use those 1996 GRI emission factors, which would be consistent with the GHGRP and again with the Methane Challenge program. So the overall idea here is just to introduce more consistency among our programs. And we can't do that for all the sources yet, but we're moving towards that, and we'll start with these 2 sources here. And with that, I will now turn things over to Steve Michener, an EPA contractor to the program. Many of you may recognize his name from emails sent out during reporting season.
Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, let's dive in and take a look at one of the draft proposed reporting forms. We're going to take a look at the form for the production segment. And I did want to note that the look and feel for all of the segment forms is relatively similar to this. So what we see here today is going to be widely applicable to the forms for the other segments as well. So we'll go ahead and dive in. The first tab that you'll see in one of the proposed Excel reporting forms is for partner information. And this tab is relatively self-explanatory. Basically, partners will select their name from the partner name dropdown. The reporting year will already be populated based on what reporting season it is. And then under that, you'll see a little table of contents. And for this form, it's dehydrator vents, pneumatic controllers, and then there's additional production activities. So that table of contents is actually direct links. If you click on one of those links, it'll take you directly to the data input form for that emission source. So we'll go ahead and take a look at dehydrator vents to start. So this is a look of the form for this emission source. As you can see, it's relatively simple. The very first column is for start year. And in most cases, that's obviously going to be the current year that data is being reported for. But I did want to point out that you can also select past years if you're interested in entering information for historical reductions that your company has achieved. Also worth noting on this form is that columns that are highlighted in gray are columns that will auto-populate based on inputs to the form. So once you enter something in for the start year on this form, the eligible sunset years for that emission source will populate. And then the third column, column C, for automatically calculate sunsets, you can either choose yes or no. And if you choose yes, then it will, the end year, column D, will automatically populate based on the eligible number of sunset years for that technology. Also of note, column E, you'll see that there are 3 different calculation methods for this source. It's the default calculation, standard calculation, or other calculation. And on the next slide, we'll kind of see what this form will look like with some data in it. So as you see here, the year 2017 is selected. In column C, we've selected to automatically calculate sunsets. So the end year automatically populates based on that input. And we've selected to use the default calculation here for this. And so now you see that the options to enter in information based on the default calculation are now available. So in this case, you would enter in the number of flash tank separators that have been installed, and then the average gas throughput, and then that methane emissions reductions would automatically calculate there in column H. And also worth pointing out is that the header there for column H provides an explanation of how the calculation is conducted. So you can actually see what calculation is, what inputs are going into the calculation to calculate that methane emissions reduction. On to the next slide, this just shows how your options for inputting information change based on changing the calculation methodology to standard. And then the next slide just shows additional fields opening up if you select to have the other calculation. If you select other here, it's basically enables the partner to input their own methodology, and they can explain that in column N, what their custom calculation was to calculate the reductions. And then they would enter in their reductions in column M. Yep.
And before Steve moves on to the next part of the form, I did want to point out, for this particular emission source, this is using all the same data elements that you all have been reporting on for years if you report on this source. We may have removed a few elements that were not really being used anymore, but these are all the same elements that you're used to seeing, just in a different format.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the pneumatic controllers emission source. I think the main thing to point out on this form is that here users have the option of entering in their own custom methane content for gas in column C, or their own custom amount of annual operating hours in column D. If you do not enter anything in, then the default values will be used for the calculation. We'll hop to the next slide just to show an example of how this form, how data could be entered into this form. The very first row there is calculating based on custom values, sample custom values that have been entered. In the second row there, column C and D don't have any input data there. So the calculation is going to be run based on the default values for methane gas, and then the average annual operating hours. And then looking over to the right, you basically see how the calculations are slightly different based on the custom values versus the default values for the three different types of pneumatic controller conversions. Sarah, do you have anything to add on?
And I'll just point out that this one does have, you know, some updated data elements and methodology introduced. This is one of the sources that I referred to in my slides previously. So most of the tabs that you'll see on the form are the same exact data elements you're used to seeing, just in a new format, but for the new pneumatic controllers and for the mains and services, that would reflect the updated methods that we're proposing.
Okay, so the next tab is for additional activities, and I think this pretty much correlates to the Partner Reported Opportunity Pro activities that you're used to seeing from the old reporting system. And as you can see, this is a very, very simple form. Basically, column A is for the start year. Column B is where you would select the appropriate activity from the drop-down menu. And then based on that activity that is selected, whether or not there is any eligible sunset years available for that activity will pre-populate. And then you can either select yes or no to have the sunset data automatically calculate. And if it is an activity that is eligible to have a sunset and you select yes, then the end date will be calculated based on that. And then the very last tab in the Excel forms is for references. This basically just provides information on the default values and emissions factors that were used in the form. So I think that's a pretty quick snapshot of what these proposed reporting Excel forms are going to look like. I think we have one more slide that Jerome's going to go over, and then I think we'll probably open it up for some questions and answers.
Thanks, Steve. So I hope you got a good taste for the proposed changes and what we're doing in the program for 2019. If you have any questions or any concerns, please feel free to reach out to Sarah or myself. You can contact us directly, and I'll provide our contact information toward the end of this presentation. But if you want more information and specifically would like to see the actual proposed documents, you can go to the regulations.gov website, and you can enter this number. It's 1736.08 into the search box, and the information collection request information will pull up there, and you can actually see the draft forms and documents that we've highlighted for you today.
Yeah, and I'll also just note that you can use the direct link that was in the webinar listserv message that you probably received at least once. You can use that direct link in there to go directly to that second Federal Register notice in the docket, rather than going through this search option here.
Great, thanks. All right, so yeah, once again, I think we really wanted to let you know what's going on, give you a preview of the proposed changes. Once again, these changes have to be approved by the Office of Management and Budget. If there are any specific comments and feedbacks you do want to submit, you can do that through the actual ICR website, but the comments are open until March 25th. So just wanted to highlight that for you here if you have any specific comments. I think we are going to look at our questions now, and I will let people know that we are going to make this presentation available. If not this week, so certainly by next week, we should have the presentation available so that others who aren't able to join us today can see that, and I'll be available up on our website. The other thing I do want to mention is specifically about the partnership agreement, which I talked about. That only applies to the Natural Gas Star program and partners. So if any companies are involved with Methane Challenge, this does not affect Methane Challenge partners at all. Methane Challenge had a separate ICR process, and you guys are good right now. This is just for the Natural Gas Star program and the Natural Gas Star partners. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was clear about that. So with that, I'm going to take a moment to look and see if there are any other questions, and then we're going to come back and respond to any questions you may have and try to wrap it up. So please hold on for 1 minute. Okay, I think I've answered all the questions. Once again, I want to emphasize that the presentation will be available later this week or early next week, you know, we'll make sure that people, if there's interest, we also have the capability, if needed, to do another webinar. I do want to mention that there are some upcoming events and happenings in 2019. The first of which I'll mention is that we are going to be doing a series of webinars, and specifically looking at data and analytics. And my colleague Sarah Manassian will be leading up that webinar series. So I don't know if Sarah wants to talk anything about that to cue that up, but
sure,
I'll hand it over to her.
Thanks, Jerome. I'm always happy to have an opportunity to promote this series. So many of you may recall that we had planned a workshop last year, and unfortunately we did have to cancel it, but we had a great agenda lined up, and really want to share some of the presentations that our partners and other stakeholders had you know, agreed to present. So this webinar series will be an opportunity to start introducing some of these presentations and topics to the partnership, and hopefully that will just be the beginning of a dialogue, and we'll be able to include this topic in webinars and workshops in the future.
Right. Thanks, Sarah. The other thing I want to mention is that in the fall we will be doing our partnership-wide conference, and this is the event that used to be known as our annual implementation workshop. But wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. We don't have the date and location nailed down quite yet, but that's going to be coming very soon. So stay posted for that. Right now, we're looking at a couple of locations. I think we've narrowed it down to either Pittsburgh, Denver, or Oklahoma City area. I know that not very helpful, but like I said, I think we're going to be nailing that down pretty soon, and that event will be happening sometime in the fall of 2019. So just wanted to make sure you're aware of that, and hopefully you can join us for that event. The other thing I wanted to mention is if you haven't been to our website lately, please go to the Natural Gas Star website. We have made some changes. Once again, it's all in the effort to make things more convenient, easier to access, and hopefully more attractive. So please go to our website, and you can access all of our information on past presentations and various different technical documents. And we highlight both the Natural Gas Star program and the Methane Challenge program. So I think it's a really nice website, and I want to give kudos to not only our contractor, but for Sarah for helping us to redesign our website. So please check it out. And with that, I think I'm going to wrap things up. And, I wanted to make sure that you have my contact information as well as Sarah's. And we really do appreciate your continued participation in the Natural Gas Star program. It is important. And I think, a lot of things have been happening over the past couple of years centered on Methane Challenge, but Natural Gas Star program is a very integral part of what we do. We value the program very much and value our Natural Gas Star program. So we're excited to get things rolling. And if you have any feedback or information that you want to share with us, please reach out to us. And actually in that effort, I think we have a couple of poll questions, a little survey that we're going to do. So I'll hand it over to
Well, I think
Steve,
that happens automatically
Okay.
at the end of when we conclude the webinar.
Okay. So I think with that, I think we're just going to, thank you for your participation. We're really excited about these proposed changes, and we hope you are, and we look forward to meeting and talking with you and interacting with you throughout the rest of the year. So thank you very much.